Cool. All right, let's get going.
Awesome. Yeah. So today we're going to have a webinar on the do's and don'ts of user research. And we would like to start with a little bit of an introduction to Ben and me so we can, so you get to know a little bit what we're talking about, why we're here and doing all that thing. So yeah. So wait a second. Here we go. Yeah, baby, maybe Ben, maybe you want to start.
Yeah, I can
With
start.
giving a little introduction.
I can start. My name is Ben. I've been in product for around 10 years. And the the maybe unusual thing is I used to work with Tamer actually. The maybe unusual thing is that I worked as for the majority of my career as an interim product manager. So working with a lot of different companies. I think 20 over 25 operationally in the past 10 years. And since a couple of years, I'm doing this as a freelancer, working with companies, coaching product teams. And recently now, oh, like we come to that in a second. So maybe Tama, you do a quick introduction from your side.
Yeah, happy to do that. So, hi everyone. My name is Tamer. Yeah, I've been, as Ben said, like we've been working together. I've been in the field of product management since 15 years in total. And as Ben, I was working with a lot of ventures and companies together just because of the role that I had. So I was working at Project A Ventures as CPO. I was working at Rocket Internet as a product manager. I've like learned and did all this kind of like hands-on work towards product management. And yeah, now I'm freelancing or being fractional product lead plus working together with Ben on Product Bench.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now, right? We launched Product Bench a while ago, a couple of months ago, and started with kind of like a 6 week intensive course. I see Nicholas here; he was part of the course a couple of months ago, focusing of kind of like the essential product principles. And we are trying different formats right now to get more people into building good products and doing product management well. So we're trying out different things here. This is our first webinar, so let's see how we go. Happy to receive your feedback afterwards, or also during the call.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So let's get started.
Yes.
All right. So yeah, so the general question that we have is why talking about do's and don'ts of user research. And before we're going to share our view on that, I would love to hear from anyone from the audience, like what actually brought you here? What are your challenges right now in terms of user research? Yeah, what are the things that triggered you to join this webinar?
Just put it to the
Maybe,
chat. Yeah.
yeah, just put it to the chat. That would be good.
What are you
Let's
interested
give
in?
it.
What are your
Yeah.
challenges? What do you want to learn? Expectations for today? All these kind of things. Oh, one so far.
hmm Yeah. So, yeah, Ben, why talking about do's and don'ts of user research? What is your view on that?
So let's see. Anna is
We have
writing.
Anna's writing. Okay, creating a repository of different UX resources, surveys, interviews. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. Building personas, validating solutions, evaluate value and willingness to pay. That's also a very interesting part. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. What else?
Talking to users in different situations, for example, video calls versus phone calls, experts versus new customers, etc. Nice.
Is that something you struggle with, or is that something you want to learn more about?
Should I say something?
Yeah, if you want. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, it's just an example. So, yeah, talking to like different kind of users, like um, some users who are really like in the game in our domain, so which have domain expertise. I think I can talk easier to this kind of users. In contrast to that, like users which we are onboarding So when I join like sales calls or something like that, so it's really hard to get some information from them. So
Mhm.
if I ask like open-ended questions and they didn't answer really well, or yeah, sometimes I catch them on the phone, so I call them and yeah, struggle a little bit to get some kind of information, and it's really hard on the phone when you didn't see the emotions, etc.
Mhm.
So yeah, just
Yeah.
for example, yeah.
Hmm. Cool. Thanks for the insights. Yeah, so in general, what we've seen in the past is that the overall willingness to do user research is actually increasing, right? Compared to a couple of years or like a few years back, I think user research in general and UX in general is becoming more of a mm, recognized topic, I would say. Um, but what we also see when working with different companies is that a lot of people, when they do user research, do a lot of basic mistakes and are really missing out on the really good insights, right? And this is why we want to share a few things with you tonight.
Awesome. Yeah. So, where or what do we want to learn today? So, first of all, like how to shape a meaningful research strategy, steps to conduct user research from planning to insights, and last but not least, having in-depth understanding of user interviews. Of course, during that hour, we can only scratch part of the surface, but we hope to give you some good practical tips and advice that help us move forward in that space. So where do we start when we talk about do's and don'ts of user research? And the first thing is that we need to be clear about that when we start with user research, it's about uncovering certain blind spots, something that we don't know or we don't have certain information about, right? So this is like where we initially start with uncovering user research or thinking about user research in the first place. So what we have and what we see already, and you probably know that if you're in the field of product management, you have tons of options to develop your product further. Typically, having more ideas and things is not a thing that is of problem, but rather you have a lot of things. For example, you have ideas, you have like bugs, you have feature requests, you have problems or solutions, hypotheses of what you can actually build. And all of these kind of bits and pieces are for us chances to improve our product and create something that helps us to deliver product, like create value for the business, but also especially creating value for the customer. And this is like one way to actually go about it. Of course, this should not be the only way to approach things, like managing only the ideas that are around in your company environment. It's something that just like pops up and trying to assess them. But ideally, we can have a look at certain domain expertise fields where we, for example, understand the user, the customer, or what's happening in the product space, or we can look about options that are coming from commercialization when we want to market our product. Or if we want to look into our business model, what are some kind of things that will pop up in there? And from these kind of like domain expertise fields and the ones that you've seen here, it's not an extended like full list, but in our point of view, the most relevant domain expertise fields that you're going to have. And of course, one of the most relevant part in terms of domain expertise are the user and the customer, because the moment you have some kind of insights from them, some kind of data points where you understand, okay, this is something that they're really driven by, like some really, yeah, the chance that you can create value for the customer and the business is extremely high, and like your chances to success with your product is way bigger when you uncover the right insights from the user and the customer side. But the point is, just like talking to users or customers is only one part of the equation. And what we think is that we first of all need to uncover a little bit an idea of what we want to get out of that. Like it's not really clear, just like talking to customers and users might going to be nice, but what do we want to get out of it? Like we need to be clear about that one. And here are just like a couple of things that you can typically uncover from user and user insights that might going to have a more or less direct impact on our product. This could be, for example, trends like market trends, technological trends that the people are using, We can get out things about customer segmentation, which kind of target group they are in, who do we going to want to uncover. And then, of course, majority is about like user needs, the behavior, and how the user's journey is going to look like. How does he encounter the product, and how does he, like make his decision about buying it or not buying it, using it, and just like maybe even offboarding it, up to the point where you even have, like the features, maybe some bug requests if you talk to existing customers. But you can also extract a lot of things that might going to help marketing and the acquisition, just like making a bridge from your product department to sales, marketing, customer service, where you can get a lot of insights, plus even up to the point where you can get some kind of ideas about the pricing behind, right? So these are the things that we should ideally be clear about before we start to engage on user research, because otherwise it's going to be very hard to get to the most of the most relevant points that we are actually looking for. Yeah, but where do we actually start, Ben?
Yeah, usually, I mean, in general, like in proper in scientific research, it makes a lot of sense to start with a question, right? It doesn't really make sense to just go around and look for inspiration somewhere, but actually derive a research question. Go to the next slide. And if we look at this now, what we just looked at is like there's always blind spots, right? There's always information we don't know yet in these knowledge areas. So we can actually look at, okay, where do I have a lot of information? Where am I actually missing information? And based on that, kind of like define a research question to figure something out that I want to know and kind of like build my user research around that. And we brought some questions and would love to have your feedback on it. So this is one example question, like how can we make our platform better for users? And I would just love to get your input on that. If you think it's a good research question, if you think it's a bad research question. Jan is saying it's too generic. Other opinions? I would very much agree with that. It's very, yeah, right. You can't really do any research on that because you don't really know where to start, right? What does it mean, platform?
Okay, so it's good if we ask why after the customer explain a feature. Yeah. That's for and I think this is like very interesting, Logan, that you bring that up. We need to be very much clear about the difference between an interview question and a research question.
Yes.
Right. So this kind of question is a research question. That's the things that we want to uncover. And this is typically nothing that we can directly ask the user right away and say like, hey, how can we make the platform better for you? Of course, it might be reflected in your interview questions, but this should be seen very separately. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The research question is more kind of like the meta question of your whole research journey, right? Of your whole user research journey. And then based on that, this kind of like informs the questions you actually ask people in a user research interview. So if you look at the next one, another example, what are the best ways to acquire and retain customers? What do you think? What's your feedback on this one? I'd say it's a bit more focused, maybe. Any ideas? Yeah, maybe analytics. Anna said, I assume analytics would tell you that. Yeah, I mean, analytics could also be an answer to this question, right? Analytics could also be a research method to figure out this question. User research doesn't mean I have to talk to users. You can also do user research by looking at your analytics data, for example. Jan said, good one, learning where they came from, what they did. Yes, I would agree. For me, it's still it's not very focused, right? It's like what are the best ways to acquire and retain users? Those are really big fields, right? Acquire is basically all of marketing and sales. Retain is basically all of your product features to retain and engage customers. So it's a huge question. right? Because like within that, it's like, okay, where do you start? Do we start with, marketing, or like how we optimize sales, or how we do experiments here, or how do we build retention features? So it's still very broad, kind of like,
Exactly. So you can rather split these kind of two, this research question even into two research questions, like what are the best ways to acquire customers and what are the best ways to retain customers, even though it's not specific enough, but this is an example of what you might going to have like too much as a research question involved in there. Right.
And the last one, what are the decision-making factors for tech leads that would lead them to prefer our solution over other solutions? What's your feedback on this neat little question? Any ideas here?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Yeah, I think it's very specific. If I would have to share this research with other people in my organization, I'm not sure if everyone would really understand what we're trying to figure out here, right? Because it's quite complex. Okay, what are the decision-making factors for tech leads that would lead them to prefer our solution over other solutions? Right? You could probably formulate this a lot easier. I get the point. It's very specific, but it's also quite hard, quite complex how it's written.
Absolutely. Like, and you should not underestimate the communicational power behind that research question. It's not just like for you to frame what you want to do, but also, like to bring other people on board and ask them, hey, you know what, this is what we want to find out. And if they need to start to think about what you really want to find out before they understand what you're going to do, you might going to have a problem in communicating or arguing what you want to really do.
Yeah, and maybe we can maybe go one slide further first.
Yeah.
So yeah, one more. If we look at the kind of like best practices of how we can formulate such a research question. Again, this is kind of like the meta question that informs your whole research process, right? It's not particularly the question you ask your users, yeah. Um, those are four points we have that really make a good research question. Be very clear, specific, and make it simple, right? These are kind of like already the ones we we covered right now with the not so good examples, maybe. Focus on one main topic, right? So you can run several research endeavors or research processes, but it makes sense to really focus, to not then, research a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. Make it feasible, meaning that you're actually able to answer the question you put out there, right? That's not unrealistic to actually get answers there. And align it with your objectives, meaning that whatever you want to research should actually kind of like pay into your strategy and what the goals are you're trying to achieve. And given those 4 points, maybe we can go back one slide and just as a small exercise for you, um, in the in the setting you're working with right now, right? You're coming here to learn about user research. What is currently your main research question? And you might have several ones, right? But like try to formulate the most important one that you have on your mind right now. Maybe we give you like 1 or 2 minutes to just reflect on that and try to come up with your question. And again, feel free to just put it to the chat. Beautiful. Find product market fit for new product. What's the specific research question in that?
Yeah, I see the comment from Anna.
There's two
I would
Annas.
love to. The first Anna Pintar. I would love to comment on this. But yeah, let's wait 20 seconds so people can make up their mind before we talk.
Oh wow.
Funky Zoom counts
Yeah.
negatively.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, Anna Pintar, I'd like to comment a little bit on your research question. What you might gonna consider in your research question is to not try to emphasize too much on the conversion part, like try to see it from the outside and what the customer or the user has as a problem, right? And this might gonna open up way more possibilities in how you can improve your conversion rate on the platform itself. Of course, it's good to just like create and bound it to the conversion rate, which means you are somewhere in between where the user enters the page and the users like clicks the buy button. So this actually works. So the research question itself is good. But what often happens, especially when I'm working in e-commerce fields, is that it's even more powerful to be a little bit more open towards the user itself and not just like trying to be in the conversion rate kind of thing. Because often this kind of like conversion rate optimization things might gonna lead to smaller improvement instead of just like having a big like real problem that they're really trying to solve. Hope that's clear.
Yeah, maybe we can also have a bit more Q&A at the end. NRM, finding PMF for a new product. Yes, I think that's a good endeavor, but I would say it's not a clear research question, right? It's like what is the question here exactly, right? More maybe something like, okay, what are the, you know, must have uh must have features or problem, what are the most important problems for your specific target group that actually make it worth
Mhm.
to buy for a product or something like this. Yeah.
Especially the product market fit topic, first of all, and this would be my recommendation, is ideally you're going to decompose this a little bit because product market fit can mean a lot of things. Like, do you have problem solution fit? Do you have market message fit? And all these kind of like bits and pieces. There are typically 7 or 8 kind of areas and fields how you can analyze it. Feel free to approach me afterwards. I have a little bit of some documents and working things that we used at Project A for analyzing this part. It's might going to help you in the end.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like yours, Nicholas. What are the reasons why a customer want to automate process X? It's quite specific,
Yeah.
right? It's still the question of, yeah, no, it's quite specific, and I would kind of like know how to continue with that. Speaking of
Right.
continuing.
Yeah. Like let's imagine we have now a very good research question. Now the question is, how do we approach the entire kind of thing? How do we go about it? We have a question that's good. And we first of all, I think this is important to understand is that there are different types of research methodologies that you can apply. For example, there is this generative research, like what's a good problem to solve, right? And what's a good problem to solve? And the generative research here is more if you are not really clear about which kind of direction you want to go, right? So this is like very, very broad, very open-minded in this kind of terms. There is causal research. Why is something happening? This is the guiding question that you can have in your mind, right? So this might going to uncover that you need different types of research approaches that you're going to take. Then you have descriptive research, like how do I solve a problem? Like this is like really way more down the road. So you identified the problem, and now the question is how do you want to solve it? And last but not least, there is evaluative research where you can say, like, are we getting closer to a solution? Where it's rather more about like testing what you already have in mind and something be very, very close and understand if it really like works to what you initially wanted to solve. Right. And having these kind of like different research methodologies or directions in mind, we can actually map it down towards the most relevant or most common research approaches that you're going to take. And of course, interviews are very important. The most powerful, in my point of view, is doesn't matter if you're B2C, but also in B2B space. Field studies like observing people where and how they work and where they do things might be less of relevance in e-commerce, but if you are in B2B with low scale B2B, this definitely makes big sense. Surveys, customer feedbacks, also very good data analysis, usability testing. A/B testing also sometimes, competitor analysis, market or desk research could all help. And the interesting part is like when you map this kind of down towards the different types of questions that you have in mind, you can start to select which kind of methodology might gonna make most sense, right? So for example, if you have an evaluative research, are we getting closer to a solution? Of course, a competitor analysis or market research doesn't really help that much. And if you have a usability test, and you have a question for generative research, of course, this doesn't also make not that much sense. And if you see now this kind of overview, you see that the interviews are typically things where you can jump in everywhere, right? And this is like probably giving them the relevance and the power as one of the most relevant research methodologies and where we're talking about user research today. So this might gonna help you to understand a little bit more where you are and how this is gonna be located and what's gonna be the best way to approach that. And here are some do's that we think is important if you go about it. Like one thing is to look at the answers from multiple angles. And this is something, I'm not sure who that was in the beginning, mentioned that you can have this so-called convergent validity, like, hey, you find some kind of things in your data analysis part and you somehow see the same pattern in the user interview. And this, of course, give you like the same kind of thing as an answer that you might gonna want to find out from two different angles, which gives you more trust and probability towards that this is a good solution and good way to actually go about it. Second thing is, and this sounds so strange to say that, but just like do it right, especially when you go into interviews, and we're going to prepare a little bit of an exercise for you to get into the interviews right. Like, I mean, I've been in company and setups environments where the company made a big research project. They formulated a research question. They interviewed 20 people and came back to me and said like, hey, Tamer, we haven't found out anything. And like I had a review until the research question was had some kind of flaws. So like the entire kind of thing that they asked just like didn't really work out. And the second biggest problem was that the interview was just like not leading anywhere because the people just like didn't do the craftsmanship behind doing the interviews right. Same applies for all these kind of like questions you have in a survey or some kind of A/B tests. Like having not statistical significant kind of data is always something that might gonna lead you into a bad direction. Last but not least, whenever you build up these kind of things and you're not having this daily habit of doing that, it's highly recommended to build up tools beforehand and things and plan this accordingly. So you make this not a one-shot thing, but as actually something that like also triggers you over time to continue doing this one, because getting continuous insights is highly important. Right, Ben.
Okay. Yeah. Now as Tamer said, interviews are kind of like a method, a research method where you can get a lot of from all different stages. You can get a lot of information, right? So that's why we want to focus a little bit on those for the remaining time. And when you talk to users, why is it so interesting? Because if you go to the next slide, it's a really good way to understand a person's experience, perspective, and also motivation, right? So it's when you talk to someone face to face. I mean, we had this example earlier, Gökhan, you mentioned when you meet someone on the phone and they're not really listening, or so that maybe doesn't count, right? But when you actually get the chance to talk to a person for a certain amount of time in a focused way and can really go deep with them into their experience and try to understand, okay, what are their needs? What are their motivations? Why are they acting in a certain way? It's a really effective way to build your mental model also of this person and their like behavior and motivations and goals. Yeah, I mentioned that, right? it's also a lot about kind of like their needs and emotions when they do something. So you can always, when you something that you don't have, for example, in surveys or in, analytics, when you look at analytics, you don't really understand why are they doing certain things? What's their underlying need? How do they feel when they, when they run into a bug or whether or with their current solution. So there's a lot of things that you have in user interviews where you can then even afterwards or during the interview understand like, oh, this is really frustrating, or oh, this really makes this person very happy. Yeah, and kind of like understand what are their behaviors, what are their habits, why are they doing certain things. Um, However, it's you as Tama said, you have to do it right, right? There's a lot of it's very easy in our experience, in my experience, to have not good interviews, right? And to really fuck things up basically. So you it lives from building trust in the conversation, even though it's short. It builds from you practicing certain ways of interviewing and kind of like also understanding how your own body language or like how you are the other person perceives you in this situation, in this dialogue. Mm, This is a very brief overview, and we don't really have time to go deeper, but we still wanted to put it here. This is kind of like from the course we teach. We distilled it from there, kind of like a step-by-step process of how to run interviews. And yeah, you probably know most of this. It's just kind of like a best practice that we like to use. Um, Again, start kind of like from the abstract, very broad position and say, okay, what is our research goal, right? What is the research question? What do we want to learn? Based on that, acquire the right people. And acquiring the right people also means not acquiring just anyone who kind of like fits into this, uh, 20 to 80 years old, all genders, driving a car, but something very specific where you send out, for example, a research screener. You ask people to fill in certain information, and based on that, you filter them to really have the people you want to target and you want to get information from. Obviously, preparing the interview, right? Really having a script and kind of like understanding or trying to define what are the questions we want to ask in the interview, what are the different buckets, the different areas we want to talk about. Conducting the interview, obviously, and we do that in a second as a role play. And then most of the people also stop here, right? This is not where it stops. It goes on because you need to document the interview. And this is kind of like the most important part because I've been in companies where people do a lot of interviews and then they share the recording. So, oh, here, look at the recording. It's like 2 hours long. Um, Feel free to watch it, but like, who does it, right? So it's very important to really then all condense the information you have there, look at the things, watch it again, maybe have someone else watch it because other people see other things, and actually derive insights from that and conclusions. What are really insights from here? And there by now there are tools for that. There you can use AI nowadays, makes it a lot easier. Um, and then to communicate all these insights you have in a very condensed format where people don't have to watch 18 hours of video or read transcriptions, but actually find okay, what's the gist? What did we learn? What did we learn from all these interviews? And then they kind of like in a high level view, and then they could go deeper. Something that is very useful is to have these kind of like interview cheat sheet, and I go through this in a um very quickly. We can also share this with you afterwards. This is really operative, really hands-on how to prepare an interview, right? It's a lot about how when you see someone face to face or even screen to screen, kind of like the importance of arriving and kind of like creating trust and rapport with the person you're speaking with, right? The second point is making an introduction, really introduce the person. What's happening now? What is the scene? Creating context. What are we doing now in the next 30 minutes, in the next 45 minutes? What can the other kind of like setting expectations? Um, Communicating that there's no right or wrong answers, that you record the session if you're recording it, obviously. Um, then also start with some basic segmentation questions to double check if you haven't followed this research screener. Um, example or a tip to really understand, like, okay, how, what is this person? Can I get some more information about, like, how do you live? What do you do? Things like this. Framing the interview context, right? So this is also about, okay, what are we actually, kind of like ties into the second thing of the introduction, of like giving more, explaining what this actually is about. And then you actually jump into this research question, right? And then kind of like try to focus on your most important questions that you want to validate first. And there's this, saying of, you have, kind of like double the amount of listening compared to speaking. So really try to listen carefully instead of jumping on, instead of suggesting things, really embrace the silence, loop or repeat what other people said, or summarize the answers, things like this. And then also very important to kind of like round everything up and leave with a good ending out of this interview. And like a very secret tip is the last one: keep the recording running until the person left the building. Yeah, we had both the experience that after you kind of like officially end the interview, there's really, really in a lot of cases, very useful information, very useful insights that people then still drop after maybe it's the pressure that is kind of like released. For example, during, like, while walking from the room out of the building or something. Sometimes there's like really good nuggets there. Okay. Um, so what we wanted to do with you is kind of like a quick role play, right? A quick role play of, do's and don'ts. And the idea is that I interview Tamer. I'm working on a team that wants to improve families' morning routine, right? And Tama is a person that I invited, and I want to interview him. All right. So we just we do a quick role play, and then we do kind of like a pause and ask for your feedback. Um, okay. Ready?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Cool. Hi, Tamer. Nice to meet you. How are you? How are you
Hi.
doing?
Hi. Thank you very much. Great to be here. Doing good. Thank you.
Nice. So I want to jump directly in. I don't want to waste a lot of your time. I'm working with a team, and we building this killer app on, solving families' morning routine. And I would like to ask you a few questions. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
Can you, I mean, you probably have the same issue of, like, having really, I know you have a family, like, really stressful mornings and stuff like this. Can you is that like a typical problem for you, like, trying to get organized with your family in the morning?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's always kind of like a stressful morning. So I have two kids, and yeah, they both go to school. The smaller one just like started in school, so you can imagine in the morning, like there's a lot of like trying to push them, make sure that they're like moving and just like being there on time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And can you be kind of like relaxed about this, or do you get very pushy in those
Sometimes,
situations?
sometimes I need to find my Zen space and just like being relaxed about certain things, especially when they start to play. Even if I just like told them 3 times that we're just like already too late and we need to hurry now, and they just like even start to get slower. So this is like sometimes hard to stay
Yeah.
there in the mood and just like not saying like, "Hey, come on, guys, let's go." Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I experience the same with my kids. Same situation, same dynamics. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting. Okay. I
Make a pause
do a
here.
quick.
Yeah, here's
Yeah, let's
like
make a
like a
pause
little
here.
pause.
Um, any any ideas? Any
Yeah.
improvement ideas?
So Ben, just like to spoiler, Ben built a lot of mistakes in there. Anything that just like that you've seen that you could have done better.
Just put it to the chat, or you can also unmute yourself if that's
Yeah.
easier. Close
Close
questions,
questions, assumptions,
assumptions.
yes.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. How did it feel for you, Tamer? I saw you kind of like looking a bit. Um,
You brought me directly
Anxious.
into the action space, and I said, like, what's going on here? It was really interesting. Yeah. No.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
do it
So
again. I'll
yeah.
try a different approach.
Hmm.
Probably have the same issue.
Let's do it
Yeah.
again. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like
Okay.
moving back in time.
Clean cut. Clean
Yeah.
cut. Hey, Tamer, welcome. Welcome to the call. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Um, Thank you for taking the time. My name is Ben, and I'm working with the team, and we're trying to support families in their daily routines, daily
Mhm.
activities, and daily routines. Where are you calling in from today? Where are you based?
I'm in Berlin here, and a little bit in the on the side of Berlin, so not in the city center, but just like yeah, we moved outwards. So.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So you
Mhm.
probably also had a lot of rain this morning.
Yeah, definitely. Like was really challenged to like get out of the doors and like okay, and it was quite warm compared to the last day. So
Yeah.
like okay, what kind of jacket do you take? Well, big question.
Yeah, big question. The transition check. Yeah, interesting. Okay. No, cool. So, what I would love to do in the next 30 minutes or so is we're trying to get a better understanding of how the daily routines of families actually work, right?
Hmm.
And I would love to ask you a couple of questions around that and really try to understand how it works for you and your family. I don't want to test you. There's no right or wrong answer. I just really want to dive deep and
Hmm.
understand how, what the issues are for you and your
Yeah,
family.
happy to
Yeah.
share that. Like this, definitely topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So can you can you walk me this morning when it was raining and you were deciding, okay, what jacket today? Can you walk me through the process of how your morning went until then, kind of like before from waking up
Oh yeah.
and kind of like until getting out of the door and getting your kids and everyone out of the door?
Ooh, it's quite a long journey. So like today in the morning, I woke up 6:45 and I actually like didn't sleep well because my kids were just like doing some actions at night, like keeping me a little bit awake and like okay, like a little bit tired in the morning. And the very first thing that I was doing was actually getting into the kitchen and start to prepare a couple of things. So like cleaning up the dishwasher, then just like the boxes for the kids, the lunch bags, preparing
Mm.
them, like start to get this one, and then just like in the meanwhile, I create like brew coffee and drink a coffee just like to also relax. And then once I'm there, I'm just like gonna wake up the kids, ideally slowly. And like yeah, first question is definitely like, okay, what do they want to have for breakfast? To get them a little bit motivated as well to actually get going, get started.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we just like moving into the um yeah, into the morning routine, trying to get them just like downwards, and getting them to the to having breakfast and start to get into this kind of like momentum. So this is what we did today. And the kids were quite tired. My son had an hour later, so I didn't need to push him that far. But my daughter, of course, needs to be there in the first place at 8 o'clock. And I have this kind of clear thing where we have an agreement where I say like 10 minutes before we need to leave the house, I'm going to tell them it's the last time that I'm going to tell you it's 10 minutes till we need to go. And I'm going to be there and we need to go. And typically
Mm.
this works quite well because 10 minutes will be enough for them after the eight to brush their teeth, to like get like their final clothes on. And yeah, and then we have a couple of
Mm.
buffer minutes before I actually go out of the door.
Mm. And you kind of like tell them the time, how much time there's left.
Yeah, I try to, like give them a little bit of a feeling of like how much time is that. Of course, it doesn't work that well, but it helps me especially to not derail and just like keep the same kind of rhythm in place because the
Mm.
moment I derail from this one, it's going to be stressful and chaotic. And I think the kids also need that, this kind of routine that is very
Hmm.
much the same every morning. Mhm.
Hmm. Okay, maybe let's for the
Yeah.
sake of time. Thank you. Very informative. Um, yeah, maybe you can also how was that for you? Maybe you can also put in some observations into the chat.
Yeah.
Something
Mhm.
something that I now real like there were at least 4 or 5 or 6 things where I could have gone deeper, and I kind of like put a note to my head, right? You were like, oh, I woke up at 6:45. So I posed kind of like a mental question like, oh, how does it work? How do you set your alarm? How do you keep track of your alarms? How do you
Mm,
all these kind of things? What exactly is the routine you're doing in the morning? Why are you doing it in the morning and not at some other point in time, right? How do you wake up your kids? Also interesting. You mentioned this um, kind of like keeping the time while your kids are getting ready. You mentioned your son had to be at school an hour later, right? So all these kind of things were like potential points to go deeper and understand better. Like, oh, how do you keep track of the calendar of the kids when they have to go to school? How do you make sure, like, do you look at the watch and say, like, oh, 10 minutes remaining, 8 minutes remaining? Or is there, do you set an
yeah,
alarm? Or,
yeah,
there's a lot of different now, a lot of interesting cues that I could go deep into. How did it feel for
yeah.
you?
So for me, yeah,
Hmm.
it was like the introduction was way warmer. Like the starting point was very much framed by the research questions. So I didn't know exactly what you want to build. So you like went out of your solution space and went totally into the problem space. That was very good. And of course, you went broad into the general kind of flow. But no, I felt like mainly I felt comfortable, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's. I mean, this is just a glimpse, a very, very quick intro, right? But it kind of like shows a little bit these do's and don'ts, and we want to
Yeah.
focus on these a bit more now, like remaining couple minutes.
Yes. So yeah, we have a couple of don'ts, and we see this a lot in user interview situations and setups. The first one is avoid any type of biased questions, something that Ben did in the first place. Like, how do you typically do things, or like, wouldn't you wake up, or wouldn't you want to go more to the gym, right? This is like the most classical kind of thing. Like, would you be more sporty or whatever? Of course, everyone wants to do that, but how much would you really do this? Is like often the like perceived behavior and like wish somewhere it's like very very different, right? So avoid biasing question is important. Yeah. Hypothetical questions: would you pay more to the shop ad? Would you like to learn more? This is like definitely no go. The only reason why you would ask hypothetical or biasing question is not to get a relevant answer, but sometimes you can use it as a trick to like navigate the interview towards the right position. So you might make sure that the questions afterwards might going to help you. So like doing this one as a trick might going to be useful, but typically in general, like this is definitely a don't. And if you get an answer to this, you can throw this answer out of the window because the likelihood that this is valid is very, very low. Don't ask too many general questions. Yeah, we had this as a comment. So definitely like too many general questions leads to the fact that the person on the other side is trying to invent answers. So he's not going to be real about his answers. He's just like trying to say something because everyone wants to be nice and no one will say, I don't know, or I don't get this kind of question. So it's part of the game to also, like be then sometimes be specific. Like we ask that don't ask too many general questions. Of course, sometimes as an entry point, helps a lot to actually go about it. Yeah. Yeah. The do's, Ben.
Yeah, I mean something I try to do is be very specific about a recent experience, right? Why? Because we as humans try to or tend to generalize, and when we generalize, it's kind of like a biased view. We don't, it's like, oh, I generally do sports twice a week, but when I think about when did I do sports last, it's a completely different answer, right? So this is kind of like a very good way to get very specific results. Ask for the why behind certain things, right? This is, I mean, it wasn't in our role play right now, but trying to understand what's the belief system behind it, what are the values behind it.
Hmm.
And always probe for detail, right? So this is what I said earlier when you asked, oh, I got up at 6:45, I immediately had this urge to ask how exactly, like how does it work? Do you set your alarm? How loud is it? What do you play? What sound is it? Is it music? What's happening to your partner? Do you both get up? All these kind of questions can tell you a lot in those different situations. I didn't do it back then because I didn't want to interrupt Tama and I wanted to get the full picture first, right? And then you can still kind of like navigate back and say like, oh, can we go back to the very beginning? Can you tell me more about XYZ, right?
Yeah,
It makes sense to let it flow to a certain extent. If I realize you're doing loops somewhere or you're getting into an area where it's like I'm not interested in, then I can kind of like try to navigate you back to the area where I'm interested in.
absolutely. And like the last thing to comment on this is it sounds a little bit paradox to just like go deeper and deeper and deeper. But the fun part is that in the depths of the answers, you're going to find similar patterns quite well, and even better than if you're staying on a surface level. Even if you feel that going into details might be way more individual, right? And then it's going to be hard to find the patterns. The opposite is actually the case, right? All right. Yeah. So time to sum up things. Yeah, we talked about how to shape a meaningful research strategy, ideally by starting with a good research question. This is like number one thing. Then from that kind of research question, you can look into what type of questions you're going to have, like which kind of research methodology might going to make most sense. And then from there, deliberately selecting the different kind of approach you want to take for research and how do you want to uncover data? Like, do you rather have some problem where you um, better look into data? Do you have something where you look into data and combine it with interviews, or is an A/B test or a usability test the better way about going about it? So this gives you at least like a very simple high-level overview of where you can start to actually get these things going. We learned about the steps to conduct user research from planning to insights. Like we went roughly through the process and we made a little bit of a deep dive towards the interview cheat sheet, like how you're going to approach and prepare this. And this is something that you should like directly train and like probe over time. So even if you are new to this kind of field, it helps to get first interviews with might not going to be the ideal customer group, but some people where you can feel comfortable with. Yeah, and last but not least, we went through user interviews and the most common do's and don'ts towards how to run an interview. So this is something that you can really like would really make a big, big difference in the results and the insights that you're going to get once you are actually there. All right. Yeah, like we're getting close to an end already for only 4 minutes left. So first of all, thank you very much for joining. Feel free to, if you want to get more content on this one, like we have a product build that's going to happen on October 23rd. There is a Luma registration where you can just like sign up for that one. It's also free. We have a next cohort is happening on the 1st of November for the Product Management Essentials course, where we get way deeper, of course, onto the things that you've learned here and to all other topics. And and soon we're also going to have a next webinar signed up, right? But yeah, you're gonna hear about that one on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, we haven't put it in here yet. But it's
Yeah.
going to be soon about like getting from strategy into actionable things.
Also want to maybe one comment on the product guild. It's kind of like a mastermind group where it's kind of like a free 1.5 session, 1.5 hour session with product people who just bring some of their challenges and kind of like get feedback from other product peers. So that's something that we recently started as well. So feel free to have a look there. It's happening in 2 weeks. And yeah, I think also opening it up for if there's any more questions around the topic, anything you want to discuss, um, feel free to put your questions also in the chat. Yes, LinkedIn also works. Also feel free if you want to connect. Oops. I'll just put my LinkedIn here. So feel free to connect here. You can also reach us via the website productbench.co, and in general, Product Bench on LinkedIn. You'll find us. It's a small world.